when you really dissect it, it's really toxic, and it actually does.
I'd like to
Mhm.
imagine an umbrella chart of toxicity in relationships, and underneath the
Mhm.
umbrella are two branches, the non threatening types and the threatening types. I've been on Netflix watching too much Too Hot to Handle.
Oh, oh wait. Too hot to handle is so toxic, but it's also just so enticing to watch. Hi guys, it's Yoon and welcome to episode 8 of Toxic Talks. And today I'm with one of my good friends. Woo, introduce
Hello.
yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole, and um, I'm a friend of Eunice. We met all the way back in Abu Dhabi a couple of
Mm-hmm.
years ago, and right now I'm a full time student at university. And before that, I used to work in a BPO call center, and I also worked in the tech and design industry for a little while. So, yeah, that's me.
Wow, that's amazing. I actually remembered the Instagram stories you had when you had like mini breakdowns. Anyway, before we continue, disclaimer: whatever we say could just be our opinion, but it also could be based on factual research. So you guys can also double check that whatever we're saying, and remember to take things with a grain of salt. Not everything may apply to you. And we're simply just sharing our knowledge of what we know. It doesn't mean we're experts in it. We're still learning. We're still learning about things. So you can also correct us if there's anything that we may have said that's incorrect. Now, Bessa mentioned a little bit about our friendship already, and I'd like to go into that. So, starting with me, I first officially met you on your, well, I don't think it was your birthday, but we celebrated your birthday along with another youth friend of yours. Yes, I remember, right? Like both of you have the same
That's right.
birthday?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. On the same birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And something a little amusing to me, like when Eunice contacted me to talk about this topic, it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of funny. Like I giggled to myself because the topic is about relationships, and
Mm-hmm.
we kind of met because she was friends with the person I was dating at that time, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how I met Eunice. So
Yeah, true.
yeah, that was kind of that was that was
it,
funny
it
to
was
me. But
it
yeah,
was it's also really weird when I look back at it. I called you like my parents, which now it's just, why did I do that and why did you allow me? um and I mean, I'm kind of gonna talk about the relationship if you're okay with it, but like I remember all three of us had this one Skype call, I think, and we were planning your wedding. We were like we were planning your wedding. I remember that so well. And like I honestly think it's like the notes is somewhere. Like it's in one of my notebooks or something. I remember that you liked maroon red and then he liked green. Yes. And I don't know. I was like, yeah, I just remember that right now. Because relationships and how I met you. I hope I hope that didn't
um,
bring any bad memories. That was just like something in my head. I was like, oh right, we planned your wedding. Never gonna happen now. But yeah,
oh, the things that we do when we're young.
true, true. Exactly. Anyway, more on the topic. So Bess is gonna help me wrap up the topic of relationships, like toxicity within relationships that I started last week with Mary, and now we're gonna continue it and also end it in this week's video. So I've been asking all my guests what toxicity is. So, for you, in your own words, what is toxicity?
So I'll begin by a preface and disclaimer. Of course, I'm not a relationship expert in any way whatsoever. I'm just someone who's been involved in quite a number of them, counting both official and unofficial ones. I'm just here sharing the knowledge that I've gained over the years, and you're allowed to do whatever you want with this information. And also the type of toxicity, again, that we mentioned earlier, that we'll be talking about in this discussion, revolves around toxicity in romantic relationships. Even though some of the things that we'll be mentioning earlier can be absolutely applicable to any type of relationship, whether it be familial, friendly, or professional, I find that the element of the attraction and the chemistry of romance and love makes it more difficult to identify and deal with toxicity in romantic relationships. It kind of puts
Mhm.
people in a weird and difficult spot. And, the world of dating is already quite complex itself. None of us are ever really clear on the idea of how to be a good boyfriend, a good girlfriend, or a good partner because there's no specific guide, unlike
Mhm.
okay, we were taught the biology of sex because that was taught in school, or how there are
Mhm.
official documents on the legal implications of marriage. We have
Mhm.
we might have books, movies, and the media to go off of, but other than that, most people are clueless. And when people have no clue, they resort to trial and error. And if you're like most
Mhm.
people, you end up with a lot of errors. And as I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier, most of our ideas of love were ingrained into our culture from books, movies, and the media,
Mhm.
which tends to portray and worship an irrational, passionate type of romantic love where fighting and fits of tears are uh,
Mhm.
found to be endearing.
Mhm.
Practicality is sort of looked over and scoffed at. Men and
Yeah.
women are encouraged to objectify each other and objectify their relationship as some sort of trophy or prize instead of seeing them
Mhm.
as someone to share mutual support like a partner. Uh, a
Mhm.
lot of us actually enter the foreign world of romantic relationships, not even aware that our initial understanding of what a relationship is supposed to be
Mhm.
is already toxic to begin with. So, according
Mhm.
to me, a toxic relationship occurs when one, both, or all of its participants prioritize love over three core components of a healthy relationship, which is trust, respect, and affection. The love that I'm mentioning here is the romantic, passionate type of love that our brains are chemically wired to experience, especially when there's attraction involved. If you prioritize love over the respect that you're given, you're gonna tolerate being treated like a doormat. If you prioritize love over trust, then you'll be making room for secrets and trust issues to arise. So is with love and affection. Prioritizing love over affection can create a cold and distant existence in the relationship. Yet somehow, especially when you're young and you don't know what you're
Mhm.
doing, you end up tolerating these unhealthy relationships for a number of reasons. Perhaps a low self
Mhm.
esteem, an underdeveloped sense of awareness, or poor handle on your emotions. But tolerating these unhealthy traits creates room for superficial and psychological unhealthy relationships, and that's toxic. So, I'll also make the case that toxic dynamics in relationships can also happen because of psychological trauma and undiagnosed
Mhm.
disorders, and in which case is caused by some sort of root problem that might actually require help from third
Mhm.
parties and professionals. So that is my very long that is my very long description of what I think toxicity is in romantic relationships.
Mhm. And they are really good points. Something that came to my mind regarding the type of relationship you were describing, like how it's supposed to be this passionate, very, crying, tears, screams, frustration, something like that, like burning them. I just thought of the movie The Notebook, and when you really dissect it, it's really toxic, and it actually does it. It really does like um prioritize love compared to trust, respect, and affection. And like you could see like the amount of things like I forgot their names. Rachel. It's Rachel and who? I forgot now.
I forgot too.
Doesn't matter. But
Doesn't.
yeah, it was just really sad that that's actually one of like when we talk about like love movies, like a lot of people bring that up. Like that's one of the best love stories like that, and the idea is yes, in the sense of like the storytelling part, you know, a spoiler alert if you guys haven't watched The Notebook, yeah. But in reality, the story itself that's being told over and over again to say that it's out of love, they're telling the story over and over again. I think it's just the story itself is really toxic. How they just come back together every now, it's on and off and stuff like that. And maybe things did change later on. We don't know. We don't know the whole, because we just like watched like a 1 or 2 hour thing. But overall, the portions that we did see were very toxic, I would say. And
Mm-hmm.
now that I think of it, that maybe that's one of the reasons why I don't agree with people when they say Notebook is like one of their favorite love movies. Like for me, it's like no, it's not. It no. Really great acting though, but like
Mm-hmm.
as a movie, it's really good. But like as a role model
Right.
for relationships, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
thank you, nah, 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 nah.
Right. Doesn't translate
Yeah,
well into reality though. Good movie though.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now you talked about toxicity specifically for relationships. Now it actually could really be not just romantic ones too. So, and I think I'd like to talk more about that. I like to differentiate it even more as to why, because like I think a lot of people have a hard time really, like when love is in our heads, we always think that everything is love. We don't actually think it's toxic. So what's the difference? Because when I've been talking to my friends about toxicity within themselves, within family and friends, there's always a distinct thing as to why it's still so different towards different relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So toxic relationships happen because of toxic people. I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
imagine an umbrella chart of toxicity in relationships, and underneath the
Mm-hmm.
umbrella are two branches, the non threatening types and the threatening types. And underneath those two branches are all the other archetypes of toxic relationship dynamics that we
Mm-hmm.
might already be familiar with, either because we've experienced being in a relationship with these kinds of people, or we might have been the ones who were toxic as well.
Mm-hmm.
I count I count the non-threatening types to be people who operate on fear and anxiety. They fear
Mm-hmm.
abandonment, rejection, and neglect, and I've been guilty of this. They rely on their partners to save them and be their superhero in their melodrama. And the threatening types that I mentioned earlier are people who I count as manipulative, controlling, and people who use other people. And I've been guilty of this. They play on the insecurities of their partner, and they might even become abusive if their toxic actions are left to grow, especially
Mm-hmm.
when they become frustrated. And they might start putting their hands on their partners in a harmful manner, but in which case they should be in cuffs because that makes room for violence in which no way should be tolerated at all. And that's a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
crucial subject that needs a more in-depth talk and discussion about. But I'll revert back to our
Definitely.
topic and yeah, I'll revert back to our topic and reiterate on some archetypes underneath my hypothetical umbrella chart that I brought up earlier. So, some types of toxic people in relationships include the ones who belittle their partner and invalidate them as a person who possesses their own sets of beliefs, thoughts, and aspirations and
Mm-hmm.
opinions. And there are others who control their partner through intimidation, and there are others who induce constant guilt upon their partner. And even
Mm-hmm.
there are also others who are overreactive and they're overly dependent, and that can cause the relationship to go sour. And I honestly am guilty of these behaviors. I was
Mm-hmm.
guilty of these behaviors, and I have experienced them as well in my past. So, bringing these traits into a relationship is a recipe for disaster, but of course, people can learn and change over time
Mm-hmm.
for the better. And I'm glad to be an example of that. So we
Mm-hmm.
aren't completely hopeless.
That is very true. Yes. And And this is also a way other people could also learn and be aware of these toxic traits. There, for me personally, I'd always emphasize that these are traits and it's not you as a person. Even when you are already labeled toxic, it's still something that can be cured. Like any toxin, usually there's something to like clean it out, to cleanse it out. They don't just stay there unless you choose to, unless you really just wanna completely like be submerged in that toxicity, then okay. But in reality, it isn't permanent. I think that's something people tend to like think of, like it's permanent, like, oh, I was already labeled toxic, I won't change anymore. Like it's as if they can't change that, and that's another toxic mindset that they can't change.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since you are coming here with your experiences, the things you did go through. And you mentioned how usually when we do go into a relationship, we're not actually aware that there is going to be toxicity, right? Because based on how we grow up, it's all lovey dovey. It's like rainbows and sunshine. Like it's the best feeling ever to be in a relationship. That's usually what's portrayed in media, even with like our friends. So since you had no idea what toxic was, how did you eventually find out there was toxicity in the relationships you did have?
So every relationship goes through its own ups and downs, and I think the general
Mm-hmm.
consensus is um, toxic relationships are consistently unpleasant because the
Mm-hmm.
negatives outweigh the positives. And a bad relationship can actually be damaging emotionally, mentally, and even physically. And I think that the good indicator for me was when I noticed a negative shift in the way that I thought. So my mind began to operate on a plane of
Mm-hmm.
constant negativity, self-deprecation, and self-loathing, and I lost trust and respect in and for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the relationship and that sort of relationship that I was in aggravated instead of I aggravated that feeling or aggravated that within me instead of mitigating it. And I think that was the moment that I realized, okay, something needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
People often describe toxic relationships as something that makes them feel drained, because I'd imagine if you're stuck in a cycle of harmful patterns, then who would it be? You can
Mm-hmm.
recognize a toxic relationship if there is a constant presence of accusation, blame,
Mm-hmm.
criticism, and demands. It's not only helpful for you to keep an eye out for those in your partner, but also in yourself as well.
Mm-hmm.
And toxicity also involves gaslighting, and that devolves someone into distrusting their own feelings and thoughts. And
Mm-hmm.
if you feel worse about yourself when you're in a relationship, then you might be in an
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy one. And
Yeah.
another thing I realized is, which was interesting to me, is that there are signs of a toxic relationship that people tend to think are normal. For example, dropping hints instead of saying something
Mm.
outright and aloud, which might pave way into passive aggression. And
Mm-hmm.
another example of this is when couples cover conflicts and issues with other things that excite them or makes them feel good
Mm-hmm.
instead of confronting the problem and solving it at its root cause. And I think if behaviors like these to become normalized, then relationships will be endangered of being
Mm-hmm.
superficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you recognize it, though. At least now you're out of it and you're better. You're getting better. You're healing from whatever that's been happening. Something that you mentioned about gaslighting is that sometimes I feel other people won't notice that it's gaslighting because the terms people will say, like, I know you, like that, like
Mm-hmm.
it's that idea that I love you so much, so I know you better than you know like there are, those fancy words kind of make us think like, right, they do know who, like there's some truth into that. Like they do know you as a person. So whenever somebody would be gaslighting you, you wouldn't actually know because like, wait, they actually do know me. So it's kind of, it's really hard. But I think it's better when you just have a firm um identity of who you are as well. Because like usually it's a hard, you find it harder if you don't really know who you are as a whole. It's when you
True.
just have this like half identity kind of thing where, oh, I know this much of who I am, so I'm fine.
Mm,
And but then later on, people will start saying things, and I guess one of the things could be from other people thinking that it'll also please the other person if they do act that way. Like
mm,
subconsciously, people will be like, you know what, maybe you are right that I am like that, so I
mm,
will be like that. That sometimes happens, especially if you hear
mm.
it so many times. Like if it's said
True.
so many times, you start to think it's true, right?
True.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
and it's scary when it's like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Now, let's go into the fact. So the relationships did end, but did the toxicity end with them? Like whether when the relationships ended?
So, when a toxic relationship ends, so say you've decided to end a toxic
Mm-hmm.
relationship, I would say it would go one out of three ways.
Mm-hmm.
One, you leave with a sigh of relief. You've finally cut off the spoiled fruit from your growing tree, and now you can focus on yourself and channel all that energy that you've spent being in the relationship. Or two, you've actually ended up inheriting toxic traits that
Mm-hmm.
get carried over into your following relationships. Or three, trauma. Your self
Mm-hmm.
esteem is just at an all time low, and your confidence and trust in yourself as well. And
Big
that
yikes.
begins that begins to affect you and how you connect with people in relationships. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I, for example, had a really difficult time in being vulnerable and intimate with family and friends, and especially the romantic relationships following after.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with those um byproducts of a toxic relationship because I have heard it from my friends, and I personally experienced the latter one that you said, that you just like the self-esteem just gets ruined, and you just lose every sense of identity, every sense of self-confidence, self-worth, self-esteem. Everything just goes away because whatever happened in the relationship made you think that I deserve it. I deserve being treated poorly because I am a terrible person. I'm horrible. And that's really sad that people do go through that.
Mm.
Personally, for me, it was so hard. It actually just happened last year. And I thank
Ooh,
God that I'm doing better. But honestly,
go girl.
it but honestly it still gets really scary because um
Mm-hmm.
so this is not a secret. So whoever is watching right now, um too bad to you guys, I'm reserved. I'm kidding. But like right now, one of the issues though is because of the trauma that I did have. I do have a tutor, and he is really loving, he's really caring. However, based on the trauma, I've been asking him to wait because I really do not want to also like the the second option that you said that would happen when a
Mm-hmm.
toxic relationship ends, it might carry on to the next one. That's something I don't want to do towards
Mm-hmm.
this person because I do really care about them. So I told him to
Mm-hmm.
wait for a while because I just don't want to do that. Like I'm aware of the toxicity that is still in me, so I really want to cleanse all that out before I get into anything. So I'm really grateful for his patience as well.
Oh yeah, and
Hmm.
that's so good. Oh, I'm really proud of you
Thank
learning from
you.
your mistakes and being
Exactly.
more meaningful especially when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to relationships, since hookup culture is so common and really I've
Yes.
been I've been on Netflix watching too much Too Hot to Handle.
Oh, oh wait. Too hot to handle is so toxic, but it's also just so enticing to watch. I
Oh my
it
god.
I just like a sidetrack for a bit. I
Hmm.
watched like the first season and it was so fun to watch, but I didn't finish it throughout just because I was like, no, this is so bad. I don't want because like of course what you watch feeds your head, right? It feeds what you
True.
desire. It feeds these things, and I'm like, no, I don't want that. No, thank you.
Hmm.
But the goal of to how to handle is quite good in a sense. Like it's like the idea there, like the reason why they started it is quite good, to start intimate, more intimate relationships, stuff like that. But it's just so funny as well. Like the whole show itself is just, it's beyond me.
That's reality TV for you.
Exactly. At first, I thought it was scripted, and I was like, later on, no, they can't be that good of an actress and actor to be like, no. Anyway, so how did you recover from the toxic relationships? Or are you still recovering? Are there still things that you haven't fully recovered from?
So right now, I would say there are still a few things that
Mm-hmm.
I tend to see in myself, like I catch myself. Um, I like thought patterns that I used to have. I still catch myself doing them sometimes, but it's good that I actually catch myself this time, and then
Mm-hmm.
I take a while to reflect and be like, okay, I need to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make the same mistakes that I've done before. You know, I it's just I'm just
Mm,
really
it
proud of myself to
yes.
actually catch them and not be
Yeah.
like all naive like how I was when I was younger. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's when you start from there, you can sort of begin to actively make a change to
Mm-hmm.
the kind of person that you want to be in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship for the sake of yourself and also for the good of the person that you're with and also for the
Mm-hmm.
people around you. So yeah.
Exactly. And I'm really happy for you too. That is a big accomplishment when you are aware, because you're able to say no, I'm not going to hurt myself or anyone else either, because when we're not aware of the things that have hurt us, we end up just doing things naturally because that's what we think is natural. Hmm.
Hmm.
So you've recovered from it, and so I think personally, I think both of us, I've seen your post, you've seen my post. I think both of us have just started learning, like we read a lot about how to avoid toxicity, how how to overcome it, how to do things better in the next relationship. So brings me to my next question as to what are the boundaries you've set to avoid having toxicity come in the relationship again?
So all healthy relationships have boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
A relationship can't be healthy if there aren't clear boundaries, and those boundaries need to be in place and respected.
Mm-hmm.
In a romantic relationship, the boundary line helps define what you and your partner, I mean, where you and your partner start and stop. It creates
Mm-hmm.
natural limits. And these limits work to your benefit when each partner understands them and agrees to abide by them. Another way of saying this is boundaries distinguish what is your responsibility in the relationship from that of your partner's.
Mm-hmm.
So what is each person in a relationship responsible for? They're responsible for their individual bodies, words, emotions, attitudes, values, and preferences. And that means, for example, if you don't want to be touched because it feels bad, then you have every right to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa, if you say unkind words to your partner, you take the responsibility for those words and apologize.
Mhm.
If your partner asks you why you're quiet, you have the responsibility to help them understand what you're feeling instead of letting them guess. And the presence of healthy boundaries in romantic relationships reduces the tendency to blame your partner, because
Mhm.
blame is almost always a maneuver to deflect ownership of a problem.
True.
When you take responsibility for your partner in a misunderstanding, conflict, or harsh treatment, and your partner is willing to take responsibility for their part, resolution of the problem becomes so much easier. So
Mhm.
clear boundary lines help you determine where you start and where you stop. They help
Mhm.
define which responsibilities in a relationship are yours and which one belong to your partner.
Mhm.
And yeah, healthy boundaries are your way of saying, I'll do everything I can to take full responsibility for what's mine.
Mhm.
And when these lines of responsibility are clear and respected by each person, emotional intimacy has a strong foundation to grow upon.
Mhm.
But when these boundary lines aren't understood or honored, then that's when problems begin to arise. So
Mhm.
some tips that can help you establish and maintain healthy boundaries: communicating your thoughts and feelings honestly and
Mhm.
clearly by being honest and but respectful at the same time in sharing your thoughts and feelings with your partner, taking responsibility for your choices instead of blaming
Mhm.
your partner for how you feel or for what's happening, and ask yourself how your choices, purposeful or accidental, might have contributed to the situation. Express
Mhm.
your feelings as belonging to you without blaming your partner. For example, it's better to say something like, I feel hurt and misunderstood in this conversation, rather than saying, you made me feel hurt because of the way that you
Mhm.
talked to me. The former is simply you expressing an emotion, but the latter is blame, blaming your
Mhm.
partner for the hurt feelings. So healthy boundaries take practice, of course,
Mhm.
especially especially if you've come, let's say, from a background or a family where boundaries were unclear or barely recognized.
Mhm.
But healthy boundaries help nurture and create healthy relationships. So yeah.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. I think one of the toxic ideals is that they think you have to be open about every little thing, that there should, like, there's just this openness, like all that I do, all that I say, it's out in the open. When in fact it doesn't have to be like that. You're still you're a person first before you're a person in that relationship. Like, you take care of yourself first. You set these boundaries to take care of yourself. It's not you not wanting to trust them. It's you just simply saying that I have self-respect. I want to take care of whatever beliefs I have, whatever ideals I have. These are mine, and these are the boundaries. And I think as well as that people think that boundaries have to be set in stone. They could change over time, you know. It's just that sometimes it's like this, like how certain fences just change over time, like because the previous one doesn't really work well anymore. It doesn't really
Mm,
apply now. And maybe you want to expand um your zone. So like you also change the boundary because you might be more open. And I think some people just think boundaries are supposed to be non-negotiable as well. It could be talked about
mm,
too. It's not something like, oh no, we can't discuss this. This is it. Um you are in a relationship, so it is a partnership. So we should
mm-hmm,
discuss, and it if you really want healthy relationships as well, it is good to explain it fully, that they understand it, because some of the things that I've heard from other people is that they just accept the boundaries without asking why. I mean, not every, of course, there are certain moments where you're not entitled to explain your boundaries. That's true. However, in certain relationships, you do have to explain certain things, especially if the other person is not sure exactly. Because I do believe understanding why that boundaries was set gets you have this bigger empathy to like say, oh, I get it now, I'll definitely keep that in mind. Like they know the reason. It's because, oh, I set this boundary because of a trauma, I set this boundary because of a certain pain. And sometimes people neglect to say those things, like neglect to explain that this happened, although it is quite valid that people have to take their time, but it is encouraged to, as you really want your relationship to grow, you do have to say these things later on. You have to explain that these are the things that happened in the relationship before, and I just don't want them to happen again. And that's really natural. But yeah, it's really different with different dynamics. There are some people who
Mm-hmm.
can say things openly. There are
Mm-hmm.
some who likes to take their time with it. Personally, for me, I'm like that because I'm really non-confrontational. And a lot, like, I a while ago when you were saying dropping hints like this passive, I was like, oh, I'm kind of getting attacked here. But yeah, I'm really non-confrontational in the sense that I don't know, I always just like think it's better to like deal it with myself, quote quote, because it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily always happen, because sometimes I explode. So coming from me, it's good to express it, like to
Mm-hmm.
express whatever happened. It's better. Although that's something that I'm still working on, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it comes from just always wanting to please people, which is a toxic
Mm-hmm.
trait that I did have when I was younger, just wanting
Mm-hmm.
to please everyone. But now it's just like a natural instinct kind of. So I it's kind of hard
Mm-hmm.
for me to like speak up. And but it's true, like a while ago you said that toxicity could be on your side, and it could also be non-threatening. Like the way I would say that was how I was anxious, I was fearful. So those things, it wouldn't be so obvious that the things are being toxic, but apparently everything's so toxic because in my head everything's wrong in the relationship, but the other person does not know that because I kept that to myself. So there are relationships
Mm-hmm.
like that where suddenly the person, I've heard so many stories, it's so sad to see them like that, because when they show it on social media, it's like they're always happy. And then later on, apparently there was just a lot of things that they were keeping from their partner, and you're like, wait, what? I thought you were happy with them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And before we actually go to the last question, let's talk a little bit more about why we have a toxic mindset, right? Like it's shown on social media so heavily as well. How this is what a relationship should look like. And I believe one of the toxic mindsets is that people put other people's relationship as a role model. Like, oh, that's how we're supposed to be as well. Because it could be good that the relationship they're looking up to is healthy. But I think people should know that healthy is not the same for every person. Like how all of our bodies are really different too.
True.
Like not everyone can eat the same diet. Like for other
True.
people, certain diets are actually really bad for them. Like it might actually kill them if they eat a diet that's supposedly healthy for you, for your body type, but for another, it's not. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something I would like to talk more about. Like for you, what's a toxic mindset that you thought was like you should have in a relationship based on what was fed to you because of things you heard?
So for me, I think one of the things where, for me personally, again,
Mm-hmm.
a very personal thing. I'm someone who values my independence. I'm very confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
Very confrontational. I I kind of like to do whatever I want. And
Mhm.
then I think when I was younger, I always thought that like a woman in a relationship, it's supposed to rely on the man.
Ah.
And that's sort of an really outdated way to think
Mhm.
about relationships or man and woman dynamic. But
Mhm.
that was something that I kind of had to grow out of. And I actually had a few misunderstandings in relationships because of that, because I was so distant from the other person because I was just being me. But then
Mhm.
again, it probably just wasn't a good match, or I was lacking in communication.
Mhm.
I'm working on that as I go along. But yeah, that was something that I thought, like, I wondered, okay, relationships aren't just for me. Like, I
Mm.
I'm I'm like, no, this isn't for me. Like, I literally said to the person who I was dating now, way before we were even together, like I said,
Mhm.
I am not someone who's fit for a relationship, man. And then jokes on me, we got together. But but that's because he sort of understood that, and then that's how our dynamic worked. And then that was one of the reasons that he was attracted to me, and then I admired that he respected that
That's
of me.
great.
So yeah. So yeah, I think that was one
Really?
thing that I thought of
I'm
for
really
a long
happy for
time.
you. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I guess, of course, relying on another person is not necessarily the toxic mindset. It was more of like the specified role as the girl, the woman in the relationship.
Mm,
You have to rely. I think nowadays it's still something that can be talked about, but like it's supposed to be talked about as in the sense that both people rely on each other, not just one
mm,
more than the other. It's supposed to be
mm,
a partnership. And something that
mm,
I've learned is that in a partnership, you're meant to be equal in a sense that both of you have things that you can and cannot do, and it's when it weighs out, you're both equal. It's not saying equal like both of you have the same sets of skills, same set of knowledge. It's more of that you hold each other to an equal extent that you know that you have each other's back, because that's what a partnership should be. And but there are times that I have read that sometimes the partnership is sometimes 60-50, so like that, but it's also something that needs to be communicated as well, which is so bizarre. Like for me, I guess to share what I thought was fine was more of, it's the same way like women are supposed to be more meek as well, like very quiet.
mm,
It's not that you're not allowed to speak. It's just that the man should wear the pants in the relationship, something like that. And per se for me, I just have a lot of knowledge. Like I remember one of my like uh friends that are like older brothers told me this when I was really young, because they saw that I had a big brain. Like they said that my I'm really intelligent, stuff like that. But then they said, but Eunice, honestly, I have to tell you this: don't dumb yourself for guys, because they noticed that whenever I had the crush, it was they would say that I was out of their league. And for me, I was like, "What do you mean? It's okay." And like, Eunice, can they really understand you though? No, you're the one just being really understanding. You're going to their level. And I was like, oh, I didn't know. You wouldn't think that was toxic, right? How would you think that would, it was just like me being very understanding apparently. And apparently that was also kind of toxic because I was lowering myself, like the standard.
mm,
And nowadays, I'm like saying, you know what? I'm I'm out of your league to any guy that like tries. And like I actually say that to myself, not outward like to anyone, no, but like whenever anyone tries nowadays, I'm like, you better catch up. Like you have to have the attitude of catching up with me, because if you can't, no, I'm just gonna keep going. you like, no, I'm not gonna like stop for you. Like you could like like there was this one uh what was this? It's a series. It's called Relationship Goals by Transformation Church. And there was this one part where the pastor said that you as a woman who is strong and independent and you're running the race, you're supposed to keep running even if there's a really cute guy there, like you want to stop for them. No, if you want that guy, they have to run with you, you know, like they run after, you're not gonna like stop for them. And I was like, oh, oh, I see now. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
that's a different, I'm not saying to be chased, like that's also a toxic thing, like having that attitude, oh, you should chase me. No, that's like, you know, like false
That's
hope, that's different. But it's more of the idea that if you really want to be with someone, you have to really journey with them, you have to run with them.
mm,
If they really want to, you like invite them to run with you. If they don't, then don't. Just go ahead, just keep running, run
mm,
until you find someone who
mm,
wants to run with you as well, because being in
mm,
a relationship is a commitment to be together for a lifetime, and that's a journey, it's a race.
true.
So personally for me, my toxic trait was just like me thinking that I had to be dumber than the guy just because, yeah, nowadays I'm like, nah. If I mean, you just have to, but yeah, this it, you don't have to be like me, you just have to respect that I will be smarter
Mm,
than you. Because the like a lot of guys, it's sad, but like there are guys that are progressive, that are learning, but majority of nowadays they still feel so intimidated and inferior to women that are just, you know, just higher in a lot of things. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, now let's going back to our my questions. The last one is, so we talked about toxicity within relationship, like you've experienced it already. So for others that may be watching who isn't in a relationship just yet or is thinking about getting into one, what's an advice you could give so that they would avoid all these things? Because it might just be their first relationship. And even if they hear this, sometimes it's still hard to still figure it out, even when you know the knowledge. Because first time experience is still so different. Even when you say,
Mm,
I already know this. So, what's an
mm,
actual tip that you could give to those who would want to go into one?
mm-hmm. So before entering a relationship, I'd advise for someone to ask themselves these set of questions, and I've got a few of them, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
iterate on each one as I go. One, is this the kind of relationship that I want? Like, have an honest conversation first with yourself and then with
Mm-hmm.
this person that you're interested
Mm-hmm.
in, and ask what they're looking for and what that means to them. Specificity and clarity are important since people have different, again, people have different perceptions or understandings of
Mm-hmm.
what something means. Talk to them about your commitment levels,
Mm-hmm.
expectations, your wants and needs. Second is, am I okay with myself regardless of what my partner says or how
Mm-hmm.
my partner makes me feel? It's important for our well-being to not depend on our partner or having a partner in general to feel okay about ourselves. We can't
Mm-hmm.
put our worth in something that we could potentially lose. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes being spent single is important to, our personal development as well.
Mm-hmm.
Next is, does this person have qualities that are important to me? If
Mm-hmm.
you won't be mostly happy in your relationship, then it's probably not worth pursuing. Think about the qualities that are important to you in a partner and ask yourself if they have those qualities, and,
Mm-hmm.
answer honestly, because sometimes people fall for the idea of a person and not the person themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Can And the next one is, can I give this person the attention and love that they deserve? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
important to be fair to the other
Mm-hmm.
person to create a mutually happy and healthy relationship. And next is, would I feel safe and comfortable in this relationship? Because finding a relationship that's healthy in which you feel safe and comfortable is crucial. If
Mm-hmm.
your loved one notices any red or even yellow flags, pay attention to them and respect them
Mhm.
because your contentedness is important and we notice red flags for a reason.
Mhm.
Trust them and take care of yourself because you're just doing what you need to do to make sure that you're okay.
Mhm.
Next is, can this person give me what I need from them? So, again, be honest about your needs and ask them what they can give. If you're happy or fulfilled in this relationship, if you won't feel happy or fulfilled in this relationship, then it might not be worth it. So, from what I've learned, a healthy and sustainable relationship, um, sorry, from what I've learned, a healthy and sustainable relationship for me is where one partner learns from the other and vice versa. And the cycle of learning
Mhm.
and teaching, and the cycle
Exactly.
of learning and teaching continues. And you might not get the answers that you want, but don't take it personally. Take care of
Mhm.
yourself. Take care of yourself first. Respect
Mhm.
your boundaries and communicate openly. If you don't get the answers that you like, then if that makes you stay single, then that's okay. Because
Mhm.
being single beats having to deal with the struggles and trouble of being in the wrong kind of relationship any day.
True.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
those are some things, some questions to ask, and some
Mhm.
thoughts to ponder on before entering a
Exactly.
relationship, whether it be your next one, your first one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
True. Very true. And thank you for those questions. Even I will go back and listen to this and think, oh, those are very interesting. So I'll keep that in mind as well. And that is all for this week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
I had a good time and I hope you had too. And I wish you the best for your relationship, of course. I hope you guys
Thank
are
you.
great and everything. And yeah, the floor now is yours for anything you want to plug, anything you want to share.
So I'll plug in my Instagram, and in my Instagram, you can also find my art Instagram where I make art. I specialize in 3D art, crypto art, environment
Mm.
design, and what else? I also stream video games on Twitch um on the majority of days of the week. And what else? I also have some voiceover and voice acting work on Fiverr. You can just hit me up on Instagram, and that would be it.
Wow, really a very independent woman who has a lot going on. Yeah,
Thank
great.
you.
Just
Thank
make sure you
you.
still have time for yourself. You've
Oh,
said
hell
it,
yeah.
Yeah, great. All
Yeah,
right,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much for your time. Bye bye. Thank you for watching this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Make sure to check out my socials, my friends' socials, and Toxic Talk socials in the description below. Once again, I encourage you to ask questions that will be answered on that 19th episode. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you are notified when the next episode goes up. As you wait, you can check out all my YouTube videos on my channel. Take care always and stay safe. Bye!